The alarm clock buzzed at 4:45 a.m. sharp, rattling on the cracked wooden nightstand. Ethan Cole's hand slapped down on it before the second ring. His body screamed for another hour of sleep, but he couldn't afford that luxury. Not when the rent was due in 2 weeks. Not when Lily needed breakfast, school supplies, and shoes that weren't full of holes. Ethan sat up slowly, rubbing his temples. His 32 years felt like 50. His broad shoulders were slouched with exhaustion, his hands covered in callous and half-healed cuts from endless construction shifts. The apartment around him was dim, cramped, and cluttered. The heater had stopped working 2 winters ago, but the landlord didn't care as long as the check cleared. The wallpaper peeled in strips, and the fridge groaned like it was on its last breath. And yet, across the room, under a tangle of blankets, lay the only reason Ethan was still breathing, Lily. 7 years old, with a mop of dark curls and the same amber-brown eyes as her mother. She stirred in her sleep, hugging the ragged teddy bear she'd carried since she was a toddler. For a moment, Ethan's chest tightened. His late wife, Rachel, had sewn that bear's button eyes back on a dozen times. She had been the glue that held their small world together, until cancer stole her away 2 years ago. Since then, it was just Ethan and Lily. Father and daughter. Teammates in survival. Ethan stood, wincing at the ache in his back. He whispered to himself, the same phrase that had become his morning mantra, "I can't afford to die." He wasn't being dramatic. It was simple math. If he went down, Lily had no one. No grandparents. No aunts or uncles. Just the foster system waiting like a hungry wolf. And that was a fate Ethan swore his daughter would never know. He shuffled into the kitchen, opened the fridge, and sighed. Half a jug of milk, a couple of eggs, some bread, and leftover beans. He scraped together toast and eggs, humming softly so Lily would wake up to something gentler than silence. Soon enough, little footsteps padded into the kitchen. Lily rubbed her eyes, yawning. "Morning, Daddy." Ethan forced a smile. "Morning, sunshine. Sit down. Breakfast is almost ready." She plopped into the chair, swinging her legs. After a bite of toast, she looked up at him with those wide, questioning eyes that always cut him to the bone. "Daddy, why don't we have a house like the other kids at school?" Ethan froze. He hated this question. He hated that his daughter had noticed. He crouched down, meeting her eyes. "Because houses are just walls, Lily. What we've got is better." She tilted her head. "What's better than a house?" He tapped her nose gently. "Each other. As long as we've got that, we're already richer than anyone." It was true, and yet not enough. Because love didn't pay the electricity bill. After breakfast, Ethan pulled on his worn work boots and walked Lily to school. He held her tiny hand in his rough palm, weaving through cracked sidewalks and the noise of the city waking up. Other parents kissed their kids goodbye at shiny SUVs. Ethan kissed his daughter at the rusty gates of a public school where teachers were underpaid and the playground equipment looked like it belonged in a scrapyard. Still, Lily smiled. She waved with all her might. "Bye, Daddy. Work hard." Ethan smiled back, swallowing the lump in his throat. "Always." By the time he got to the construction site, the sun had barely risen. The foreman barked orders, men hauled steel beams, drills and saws roared. Ethan threw himself into the grind, every swing of the hammer a reminder that he couldn't slow down. Not for pain. Not for fatigue. Not for dreams. Hours blurred. Sweat stung his eyes. His muscles screamed. His body begged him to rest. But in his mind, one truth repeated like a drum beat: I can't afford to die. I can't afford to die. Lily needs me. When the shift ended, Ethan's shirt clung to him with sweat and dust. He dragged himself toward the small diner down the street, where he'd pick up a few hours as a dishwasher before heading home. 2 jobs. Sometimes 3. All to keep the lights on. That night, back at the apartment, he tucked Lily into bed. She clutched her teddy bear, yawning. Daddy. Yes, baby. Do you ever get tired? He chuckled softly. Sometimes. Then why don't you rest? He kissed her forehead, brushing her curls aside. Because I've got a promise to keep. And that promise is you. She smiled sleepily, drifting off. Ethan sat beside her until her breathing evened out. Then he whispered into the darkness, as if confessing to the night itself, I can't afford to die. He didn't know that by tomorrow, fate would test that promise in the most brutal way imaginable. Chapter 2, The Day Fate Intervened. The next morning was colder than usual. Ethan zipped Lily's coat all the way up to her chin and wrapped his scarf around her neck. Daddy, I look like a snowman, she giggled. Good, he said, adjusting it snugly. Snowmen don't get sick. They cut through the city park like always, saving a few blocks on the way to school. The grass was frosted, the benches slick with dew. Ethan's mind was already on the long day ahead, a half shift at construction, then a side job fixing a leaky roof for a neighbor, then late night dishwashing. But then, he noticed her. Across the street, a woman stood out like she didn't belong. Elegant wool coat, leather gloves, hair neatly styled. She held her pregnant belly with one hand, her other clutching a phone she didn't seem to be using. Her eyes darted nervously, as if expecting something. Ethan barely had time to wonder before it happened. A masked man emerged from the alley. He raised a gun. Time froze. Ethan's heart thundered. Instinct screamed at him to grab Lily and run. But the woman, she was frozen in place, terror locking her feet to the pavement. Ethan shoved Lily behind a bench. Stay down. Don't move. Then he ran. The gun fired. The world exploded into noise and light. Ethan felt fire rip through his side. His knees buckled, but he didn't stop until his body collided with hers, shoving her to the ground, shielding her with his frame. Pain tore through him like a blade. His vision blurred. Somewhere behind him, Lily screamed. But the gunman fled, startled by the chaos. And Ethan lay there, bleeding into the concrete, whispering to himself even as darkness pulled at him. The sound of a heart monitor beeped steadily in the background. The scent of disinfectant clung to the air, sharp and unforgiving. Ethan's eyelids fluttered open. For a moment, he couldn't remember where he was. Pain seared through his side, reminding him in a cruel flash, the bullet. The woman. Lily's scream. He tried to sit up, but a firm hand pressed him back. Don't move. His eyes shifted to the source of the voice. A nurse, mid-40s, with kind but no-nonsense eyes. She adjusted the 4-tube in his arm. You're lucky, she said. The bullet missed anything vital by an inch. You'll live. Ethan exhaled shakily, relief flooding him. Not for himself, but for Lily. He turned his head and there she was. His little girl, curled up in the stiff hospital chair, clutching his jacket like a lifeline. Her small chest rose and fell in uneven breaths. She must have cried herself to sleep. Ethan's throat tightened. She almost lost me today. Daddy. Lily stirred, her sleepy voice barely a whisper. Her eyes opened, red-rimmed but shining with relief. You woke up. Ethan reached for her hand. His calloused fingers enveloped her tiny ones. I told you, sunshine. I'm not going anywhere. But the door creaked open, and the woman he had shielded stepped inside. Sophia Hale. She looked out of place in the sterile hospital room, her designer coat draped over her shoulders, pearl earrings glinting under the fluorescent lights. Her makeup had smudged from tears, yet she carried herself with the kind of poise only people born into wealth seem to possess. Her eyes met Ethan's. For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Finally, she spoke, her voice trembling. You saved my life. Ethan's jaw tightened. Don't mention it. No, she pressed, stepping closer. You don't understand. You didn't just save me, you saved my child. She placed a hand protectively over her belly. I owe you everything. Ethan looked away, focusing on Lily. I didn't do it for thanks. And I don't want your money. Sophia blinked, clearly taken aback. I wasn't. But Ethan cut her off, his voice firm despite his weakness. People like me, we don't do things expecting handouts. I did what any decent person would be done. Sophia studied him, her lips parting slightly as if she wanted to argue. But Lily stirred, drawing her attention. The little girl climbed onto Ethan's bed carefully, laying her head on his chest. Daddy, are you hurting? A little, Ethan admitted softly, brushing his hand through her curls. But I'll be okay. Sophia's throat tightened. She had seen wealth, power, and privilege all her life, but never this kind of bond. A love so raw and selfless it made her chest ache. She cleared her throat. At least, let me cover your hospital bills. Ethan snapped his head toward her, his eyes blazing. I said no. I'll pay my own way. Sophia's eyes widened. No one ever rejected her money. Not charities, not board members, not so-called friends. But this man, this broke single father, looked at her as if her billions meant nothing. She wasn't sure whether to feel insulted, or intrigued. Chapter 4, When Worlds Collide. Bonding. Days turned into a week. Ethan remained in the hospital, his recovery slow but steady. To his annoyance and Lily's delight, Sophia kept visiting. At first, he thought she was just checking to make sure he wasn't about to sue her or something. But over time, he realized her visits had I can't afford to die. The